Hello. Hola. Yep. No, I'm not assigning you anything. Correct. Yep. All right. Not to take away from the reminiscing about Baba Is You. There you go. Wow, thanks. Yeah, I can't think of anything that could even do a stretch and say, oh yeah, this is a texturing game. Mm-mm. All right, so as I said at the end of modeling, this weekend I have that announcement up in FOL. You guys are going to have an in-class assignment. It's basically free marks for you guys as long as you follow along with this, or replicate rather the exact same process that I'm about to show you. So hopefully you all have that layer styles and ambient occlusion.max file open. Inside of it is the wild goose, the revolver, and the lion's head door knocker. We're gonna now it is. So, you guys already know or have been told in digital drawing what ambient occlusion is, or ambient occlusion shadows. I don't know if Jasmine or Burge does this with you guys, but I'm just going to do my spiel from the texturing side as to defining it, giving some examples of it, how it plays into the narrative for your texture. The simplest way to see the effect of ambient occlusion rather is just to hold your hands out in front of you, and I'm curling my fingers just so I can get my whole hand on screen. Holding them straight out in front of you without a light source directly in front, and then slowly bring your hands together. Now I do have a window, either, just flat surface. As your hands get closer and closer together, they start having a shadow cast or a shadow appearing on the palms. So anytime two surfaces come close together, it starts to block out the ambient light or the bouncing light in the scene, from the scene rather. So even though in my current situation I have the two LED lights above the fish tank, large window in front of me, and my two screens, even without direct illumination, you still get that ambient occlusion shadow. Not only does that, number one, give you a good sense of the object being grounded in its environment, but there's also some narrative elements or some contextual elements that gets translated across as well. So if you guys have ever flipped from standard view inside of the viewport over to high quality, 3D Studio Max will automatically start casting more accurate shadows, and it will actually do an overlay of ambient occlusion onto your scene. So anywhere you have a recessed area, anywhere there is a recess or an indentation, you end up with a little bit of shadow. Anywhere there's a hard crease, get a little bit of shadow. Where objects overlap one another or intersect one another, it's trimmed in shadow. So not only is this a nice demonstration of blocking ambient light, but that same situation that causes ambient light to be blocked will also have an effect on what the an effect on the appearance of the object itself. So for example, with the lion's head, now that I've got ambient occlusion showing with high quality mode, all those little creases are in shadow. But say this was in say this was in an arid environment, so lots of particulate matter in the air, dust storms, sandstorms, that sort of thing. Anything that's in white or not shadowed is essentially at or fully exposed to the elements, or more exposed to the elements. So if this was, a green painted lion's head, and it's constantly getting a gentle sand blast from all that sand being suspended in the air, his nose, cheekbone, brow ridge, parts of the mane, those are all slowly but surely going to get sanded, and it's going to lose that green paint and show whatever materials underneath. While all the areas in shadow, because they're not directly exposed to that wind, they're going to maintain their green color. At the same time, if there's a lot of really small particulate matter in the air, any sand that gets blown into those crevices isn't going to move, or it'll start to collect. So on the one hand, it's going to change your color, and on the other hand rather, it's going to start collecting, in the example I just gave, sand. If this was a really humid or temperate environment, rather than collecting sand, it's going to start to collect moisture. So anytime two surfaces are close together, water starts to collect or adhere to it due to surface tension. So any kind of water droplets or condensation in these cracks is going to basically make a good environment for moss to grow. And so that ambient occlusion shadow is going to act as a sort of guideline for where to place additional elements in your texture. So before we do this, I'm just going to say that you guys don't need to apply ambient occlusion to your to your Blue Falcons. you will have to generate this for the midterm. So nothing that you need to apply to your projects before you hand them in tomorrow, but next week in class you will have to do this and incorporate this. So we basically want to make all the shadow information permanent, because right now it's just Max drawing it in for us. So I've switched back to standard view. In order to get that permanent, we need to take what's being displayed inside of our viewport, or what was being displayed in our viewport, and put it to a texture. So from 3D information to 2D information. Typically it's just referred to as baking. So going to the creation tab, going over to lights, and switching from the default photometric to standard. So you've got target spot, free spot, target direct, free direct, omni, and skylight. Grab a skylight and just click in scene once. So a little bit of history on ambient occlusion. Way back in the heyday, essentially what we needed to do in order to get at the effect of ambient occlusion was to take a very large sphere. You guys don't have to do this. Take a very large sphere and then start drawing in a whole bunch of directional lights aimed at whatever object we were trying to get ambient occlusion shadows on. And each of these were shadow casting. So, yep. This guy, yep. That's fine. I'm about to get to that, or explain why that is. So for all intents and purposes, we used to have to do a large, or if we could, infinitely sized sphere, and then have lights pointing towards the center of the scene and casting shadows. Mind you, that's really, 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 really old. Not to date some of my instructors, but when I was learning this stuff, they were still having to do the infinite sphere and use lights. When I was going through my training the first time, we already had skylights, so we could just click and done. So once you have a skylight in, again, you'll notice that there's no way to click and drag to make it larger, change its target, any of that. You also notice that as you start zooming in and out on it, Snevendi, my file came in with a gray wild goose and was missing a file. Yep, that's fine. Just click continue because it's looking for the original ambient occlusion that I baked for it. And yours is gray because your swatch color, or I changed my swatch color. No worries. So as you zoom in out, as you zoom in and out, you'll notice that the skylight shape stays the same. So it's not based on world or 3D Studio Max scene size. If you try to switch the scaling tool, scale it up and down, nothing will happen. It's literally just a visual representation of that infinitely sized sphere shooting rays in. So it doesn't matter if it's been rotated, moved around, as long as it exists in scene, it's an infinite sphere. So if something's infinitely large, doesn't matter whether you move it left or right, nothing changes. And since it is a sphere, it doesn't matter if you rotate it, it's still a sphere. The only thing that we need to do to that skylight is just notice that currently it has, well, number one, it's being turned on, has been turned on. Multiplier of 1.0, so its strength, just like any other light. And then its sky color, which is just the color of light that it's creating or casting, emitting. The one thing we have to do to it is underneath render, turn on cast shadows. Because if we're trying to get the ambient occlusion shadow information off this object and we don't have cast shadows turned on, all we're going to get is something that's completely flat white and not useful. So turn on cast shadows. That's all you need to do. Switch over to the Wild Goose. And in order to start making that 3D element, so that 3D live reaction or live calculation ambient occlusion into a texture, press 0 on the number row. So at the top of your keyboard, hit 0. In 2021, it switched to having the secondary pop-up. You guys will be brought straight to render to texture. And you'll get this menu. So lots of settings. Don't let it intimidate you. For the first little bit, it's going to be just do these steps in this order. And after that, after doing that a couple times, you guys are going to be comfortable with this. So very first thing we need to do, I don't know why it gets rolled up by default, but it is. At the very top of that render to texture window is general settings. Click that open. And under output, it'll say path. And then I think by default, it's something like C drive, program files, app data, users, your login name, Autodesk, whatever. It's some crazy long file path. Hit the ellipsis point, or click the ellipsis point on the far right. That'll ask you to redirect to a new directory. Direct it to a file or a folder directory in which to save out the file. I just have a 3D Studio Max bakes folder on my desktop where I put where I set all this stuff to render to. So right click, new folder. Just go into the location that you want it to be saving out these images, and then select folder. And Carla, sorry, what did you do to open that window? It's 0 on the number row. So at the very top of your keyboard, 0 key. And then general settings, set the baked output directory to someplace a little more accessible than buried inside of your system settings. Yep, you're just changing it so that it's accessible to you without clicking through a bunch of stuff. Of course, there's nothing stopping you from leaving the default file path and then going to your desktop and just creating a shortcut. That's doable too, but I find this is slightly less rigmarole. So once it's been set, 3D Studio Max will remember it as long as you're on that station, as long as you haven't reset your user settings by reinstalling 3D Studio Max, etc. So once you've changed that output file path, you can recollapse general settings. No worries. Zero key. Go for it. Yep. Sure. For the most part, 11 people didn't put the files in a folder. It was just one person who had it named incorrectly, and that actually caused a bit of a back and. It wasn't a problem, like it wasn't an inconvenience to me or anything like that. Like, I'm not being disappointed or angry at this person for having this issue. I'm just saying that there was one person who misnamed one of their textures and didn't put it in a folder, and it ended up in someone else's submission when I was sorting everything back together. So the entire process of having the files that you're working with, so the 3D file and then the texture files that are associated with it, putting those into a folder and then zipping the folder and uploading that. Yeah, you can re-download your submission. But is it a folder in a zip or a zipped directory? That would be it then. Yeah, that would be it. So you have to actually go new folder. Yes. GG. In the output, the general, send it to some place that you can get to it. So basically when you have your file ready to submit, so like pretend this is me submitting to the directory or to the Dropbox. I've got the zip. Inside the zip is the folder, and inside the folder is your actual files. So that when you guys are going to be working with, by the end of this term, one 3D file and then 6 texture files, it keeps things from it's slightly different formatting because now you guys are doing more complex submissions. So, and later, this is also in part to prepare you for later on, not just in the industry, but later on in the term. You guys are going to be doing group projects in 3D. So in order to share your asset with someone so they can use it in their level, or when you're building out your games, saying, you know, someone send me the lamp so that I can use it in my level, rather than sending them the individual files and having them have to, you know, get everything together. Just sending them the zipped folder, the folder in a zip, and it's basically a package rather than a zipped assortment of files. I don't quite know how they're doing it this time around, to be honest. I would not be the one to ask. Next. You will have group projects this term, I believe, but not in 3D. So there's collaborative projects this term. Next term, no worries. Next term, you guys will be doing your first full game. So from your concept art to your model to your texture to your animation to your Unity integration. And then, yeah. I wish you had typed that in Twitch chat so I could just screenshot it and put it as an overlay for the rest of the class. Because that is a very good way to go about it. So I'll just repeat that for the stream, so that's on the VOD. So whenever you guys are submitting, after you submit, once you get the confirmation email, go back to submission, re-download it from the Dropbox, open it, and confirm that it's the correct format. So general settings done, collapsed. Now you'll have the objects to bake dialog where it says name wild goose, or however many objects you have selected. We're just doing single object bakes for the time being. Yep. With this window up, you can just reselect them. So I'm going to slowly go through all the settings that you need to turn on. This sort of spreadsheet up at the top, it's just displaying all the values that we're about to set. So don't worry, or don't even depend on this. Check the actual individual settings. So select object settings. There's only 2 fields here, enabled and then padding. Make sure enabled is ticked on, which it will be by default. And that padding value is your pixel bleed. So pixel bleed, pixel padding, pixel dilation, all means the same thing. It's just how far past the UV borders do you want it to record texture information. So if you're working 1024, 2048, sorry, a 1K or a 2K texture, usually you want it between, you want that padding between 4 and 6 at a minimum. Even if you overdrive this, so you set it to, 50, it's not going to take information from one shell and then bleed it over on top of another. If 2 shells are next to each other, it'll just fill in your bleed until they meet and then stop. So just for expedience sake, I'm going to set it to 6. We're not going to be doing a projection at this point because we don't have a high poly to work off of. So projection mapping stays off. One thing that you absolutely always have to check is under mapping coordinates for the object. Make sure that's using your existing channel. Basically what this is asking is, would you like to record this information or this lighting information based off of the UVs that you just spent X number of hours doing, which would be the existing channel? Or do you want 3Studio Max to attempt to unwrap your object for you and create a completely separate UV unwrap? Always existing channel. Always, always, always. That's going to be your that's going to be where most of the errors occur. So mapping coordinates, use existing channel, and it should default to channel 1 because we will only be doing single channel bakes all the way up until the end of 2nd year. So I'll just quickly go through the settings again. Object settings enabled, padding of 6, projection mapping is off since we don't have a high poly to be working from. Mapping coordinates is to use the existing channel or the existing unwrap, which should default to channel 1. And then we move down to the output. So at this point, we're just telling 3Studio Max which bits of information or what type of information we want it to record and where. So from output, click on add. So these are all the different types of information that 3Studio Max can record for us. The only one that we're going to be doing is a lighting map. And actually the only ones that we're going to be using in texture 1 are the lighting map and the diffuse map. But for now it's just lighting. So double click it or click on it and add element. So this is the same situation as we saw up at the top, where it's basically just displaying all of the settings and properties at a glance. Yep. Yep, that's fine. So this is just showing you your settings at a glance, and all of your settings are what we're about to adjust rather in here. So selected element common settings, make sure it's enabled. It will be enabled by default, so the only way this is going to be turned off is if you accidentally click it. The name is just the name for the element. So if you were to be doing multiple bakes within 3CO Max, which you guys won't be, this would be a way to stay organized. So you can leave it as lighting map, or I'll just call it AO for ambient occlusion. And you'll see it updates up here. For file name and type, just click that the ellipsis. So the dot 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 to the right. It should automatically bring you to the directory where you indicated it should be baking underneath the general settings. So in my case, it's going to my desktop in my 3DCO Max Bakes directory rather. Wild Goose AO is fine. I'm just going to put an underscore in there so that I don't overwrite the one that I had. Oh wait, the other one doesn't have an underscore. So AO. And then save as type, that's where you switch it over to a PNG, a TIF, or a TGA. Just again, no JPEGs, please. Yep. Yeah, it just already, because this is loading off of my computer, so all of my settings are still in here, it automatically defaulted me to a PNG. So (48-bit) plus alpha channel. And just hit OK. Just hit OK. You don't need the alpha channel. It will default to white if you don't add it on, which, since it'll all be outside of your shell, so it won't have any effect whatsoever on your texture. I just like having alphas. The very last thing that we need to do before we tell 3CO Max to generate this for us is say what size we want. So if you know what your texture size is, if you know you're generating a 1024, if you're not sure, remember, if you're ever unsure of what size of a texture you need to run with, always go one step up. So if you think you need a 1024, give it or bake a 2048. If you think you need a 512, do a 1024. For now, just do a 1024. And that's it. We're good to go. Now, don't change anything once you have those settings in. I'll just point out that there is another field in here where it says target map slot. This is just giving you the opportunity or the option for 3DCO Max to complete creating the texture, then creating a new material and assigning these textures to your diffuse, your ambient color, blah, 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 blah. We don't want Max doing anything with it. We want to have control of what's being done. So target map slot is being left blank. Is there any downsides for being too big? If your texture ends up being, if your in-game texture ends up being a 1024, and you're generating a 4096 by 4096, so your in-game is 1K, your generated texture is a 4K, it's just going to get blurry. It's going to lose some definition when it resamples down to a quarter. Exactly. So a lot of what your texture size is going to be, or what sets that target for what your resolution on your texture is going to be, a large part of it is experience. So once you've had experience creating a couple games and saying, okay, well, I was using 2048 textures, but my frame rate was dipping from 100 down to 36 constantly. And looking at my stress graph, it's like, yeah, texture calls were the biggest bottleneck to the game's performance. Then you're like, okay, in the future, when I'm at that scale with that many objects on screen, yeah, I should probably dial down to a 1024. Some of it is trial and error. So the first time through, you may bake 20, and this isn't the case for you guys in Texture 1. I'll always give you exactly what resolution you need to be baking, so I take the guesswork completely out of it. But even once you guys go into Substance, so some of you have already poked around inside of Substance Painter, which for the most part, asterisk, is resolution independent. So it can quickly resample between high res and low res, so 4K to 512 to 1024, etc. Most of what Substance does is texture independent, so no matter what resolution you output your file at, it'll still look the same, more or less. But any kind of painted detail, so anytime that you go in and make the texture contextually correct or correct for the circumstances it needs to appear in, those brush strokes, so anytime that you load in a custom image, anytime you do a brush stroke, those will handle being resampled the same way Photoshop does. So if you go 4096, do a bunch of high resolution detail by hand, and then you resample down to a 1024, that deresing is still going to have a negative impact on your painted texture. Not on all of it, just the stuff that you did, which obviously is problematic. So even in a resolution independent workflow, you still kind of want to know exactly what your final format is or your final resolution is, just to minimize any texture quality loss. That's a good question. It's not vectors, it's procedural gen, or procedurally generated textures. So all of my settings are done. I'm making a wild goose AO.png. It's a lighting map. Background color element is black, which is fine because we're not going to see it. 1024, 1024. We're ready to bake. So just hit render. So this is definitely going to throttle the stream for a little bit. So if it does cut out, I'm still broadcasting. Just hit refresh. As soon as you hit render, it'll say, by the way, you never set a target map slot for it to come back into max. No kidding, we don't want it to. Continue. Continue. Yep. Just click through it. No, I don't know. Cool. Say it again. Yep. Well, now you're gradually understanding it more. Yep. So, quick side note, by default there's this rendered texture window that pops up, and I don't know why mine is trying to lock itself at 512, but you know what, it actually works so it doesn't completely destroy the stream. So I'll just zoom in. So, big word of warning, big, warning lights, bold font, bright red. Never, ever, ever save this file. Never save this image. Never work with this image. This is for proofing purposes only. You're looking at this image is only up so that you can detect any errors, any mistakes, rather than starting to load it into another program, loading into Photoshop, loading into Marmoset, whatever, and then finding out that something went wrong. So the reason in this case with the ambient occlusion, all we're looking for is some shadow all over the place or shadows being cast, which we definitely have. But the other reason we don't ever use this is, and this is why I switched the swatch color on my Wild Goose from gray to purple. This color information is exactly what we don't want on the ambient occlusion. We only want white for areas that are being illuminated and black for areas that are having occluded shadows, or occlusion shadows rather. So never ever save this. Don't touch this icon. I can close this out. I'll go to my 3DCO Max Bakes directory. And there's my AO, which was saved at 256, not 512. Not quite sure why it's saving it. Give me 1 second. Don't save. Yep. Merge. File merge has become my basic go-to anytime Max is operating or functioning oddly. So I'll just do that process again real quick, start to finish. Scene in, skylight, click, cast shadows on. Don't worry, I'll do this at a slower speed in a second. Select the object that you want to bake the information to. Press 0 on the number row to go render to texture. Make sure that inside of general settings you have a directory that you can easily access. Set your padding, typically between 4 and 6. Make absolutely sure that mapping coordinates says use existing channel. Add the element that you want to bake. In this case we're baking lights and shadows, so lighting map. Set the name. I'm just going to change it to an underscore so that I'm not overwriting things. Switch to the correct file format or image format, so TIFF, TGA, PNG. Set your resolution. Render. There it goes. That's a proper 1024. And I'm still in Arnold. Give me a second. Which is a 2021 Max thing only. So scanline render, not Arnold render. Oops. Render. Go. Yep, okay. This is walking through it again. Nope, you're good. Oh, no, it's because it started baking in Arnold as opposed to Scanline. Scanline. For you guys, it's Scanline, which you should be in by default on 3DCO Max 2020. You're good. So I'm just going to let it finish baking. There's not much left for it to do. By the end of this term, yes. No worries. So, again, I don't know why it was being so finicky, but it was. So I'm sure there's going to be people, maybe not posting, but watching this back and taking odd photos or screen captures of me as I, stutter, or my camera feed stutters from the render. No worries. It's partly because the stream bitrate gets throttled because this is using the CPU and processor, or CPU. Yeah. Nope. As soon as the scanline process completes, you're done. No, as soon as you press 0 or render from render to texture, and you get that little preview window up, once that's complete, that's it. Yes. So, go to the directory where you just saved it out, or where you indicated for general settings. Find the map that it just created, which, if this is your first time doing it, should be the only file there. Or in my case, since obviously I've got a whole bunch of stuff in here, right-click, sort by date. So there's the one I just generated at a proper 1024 by 1024. Bring that into Photoshop. Correct. Correct. So as long as you didn't... Correct. Correct. Don't worry, we're not going to be doing too much. This checker pattern, it's the alpha channel. So as soon as you do a... No, it's just... Sorry, give me 1 second to just finish this. Inside of the PNG settings, so when you set the file type for the render, so I'll just pop this back up. You guys don't have to do this, I'm just answering the question. When you hit the ellipsis point next to wildgooseao.png, or defaulted to TGA, I believe, as soon as you set file name, PNG file type, and hit save, yeah, if alpha channel is not clicked, it'll just come in flat, or the background will be flat white, like what I have right now. Into an existing document or into a new tab. That is all done. Because I know that if you have a current file open and you bring it in, it'll come in as, well, it'll try to come in as a smart object, and you won't see the background, or you won't see the whatever. So I take it you only have one layer visible inside of Photoshop. All right. I can screen share with you afterwards. That won't have an effect on what we're about to do, but yep. I don't know if this is going to be it exactly, but so again, don't copy what I'm doing. I'm pretty sure I know what this issue is. And other shells look something like this, with a very hard line going through them. You don't have a skylight in. Yep. It's this thing. Don't worry about setting it up now, because I'm actually going to do another object with the exact same process. We're just going to use the end result slightly differently. So even with your non-AO lighting map, you can still do what I'm about to do and see what the effect is. So remember, anytime you bring a file into Photoshop, keep your layers named. Just as a warning, right now in digital drawing, I'm not going to speak to the process that Jasmine or Burge has you using. I will warn you right now, even though it won't affect you for another 10 weeks of class, so not this term, next term. Once you get into Substance Painter, you may think, oh, you know, I've got 7 layers here. I don't need to name any of them because it's only 7 layers. I can track what's on them. Once you get into Substance Painter, just to show you an example. So this is one of the final projects that we do at the end of term. It's a full armor set or a full costume texture. This is, conservatively speaking, 40 layers. So if those weren't named, and a bunch of them are just fill layer 1, paint layer 1, blah, 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 going through and making adjustments or finding where a mistake has been made becomes next to, sorry, not impossible, but becomes infuriating. So get in the habit of naming your layers now. While it's not the utmost importance as far as being able to find where things are, it will become incredibly crucial to your time later on. So make sure your stuff is named. And all I'm going to do, or all we are going to do, is just create a new layer, drag and drop it below the AO. And I did a Evangelion 01 styled Wild Goose with you guys, so I'm going to flood it light blue. So flood that new layer. Not the final for texture 2, that's the That's one of the final projects. It's a homework. 2 weeks. So just do a flat color flood underneath the AO. And then go into the AO, or the AO layer rather, and just switch its blend mode over to multiply. That's it. So now all the areas that were dark or black from the AO are adding their dark values to whatever's underneath. You'll actually have seen this if you watch back my pre-stream preamble when I was doing the pennant. Yep, no worries. That's how I generated all of the shadows on the pennant. So just selecting the, sorry, to answer your question, Jarrett, select the layer and not the top drop down. Correct. No worries. So just save that out. Doesn't matter where. I'm going to put it to my desktop because I'm lazy. Just a new layer, a flat flood layer. Yep. Your choice. Yes, please. You are submitting this, so if you want to use a JPEG, you know, fine. Just keep it to yourself. Your list should be AO on top, and then any of your color information underneath. In this case, we just have one layer of color information. No problem. Just drag and drop it onto the model inside of Max. Don't replace it. You want to keep that ambient occlusion as a separate file. Yep. 5%. What we... It's the diffuse. Yep. No worries. So I just drag and drop that PNG onto the model. And I only did a duplicate so I can show you the difference between the two. So on the left is that baked ambient occlusion set to multiply the light blue layer underneath. So you can see a little bit of shadow on the engine intake. You can see a little bit of shadow at the crease between the main body fuselage and the outer sort of body piece, whatever you want to call it. A little bit of trim shadow around the sides. Quite a bit of shadow in the back where the engines are. And this is still on standard quality. So this guy doesn't have the AO applied to it in any way. Looking on the interior, no shadow, no shadow, no shadow. This guy does. So a couple people have asked in Twitch chat if they should be doing this for the F-Zero Racer. You will not lose marks if you do not do this. You are not expected to do this. If you want to use this, go ahead. But I'm more concerned with making sure that you guys can get all the elements in from the write-up. This would just be a sort of icing on the cake. I would not prioritize this. Exactly right. So I'm going to do that whole process again, but I'm going to use the ambient occlusion for something completely different. So what we just generated was an ambient occlusion texture, sorry, a diffuse texture. So we're controlling the color of the object. We put in a ambient occlusion as a multiply so that it always looks like it has ambient occlusion shadows on it. Again, don't do what I'm about to do. I'm just making a demonstration out of this. I mentioned last week in regards to the human brain registers or understands something to be three-dimensional or have form based on placement of highlights and shadows. So something only looks three-dimensional if it has different lighting information. I now have a live light, so a light that's being calculated by 3D Studio Max. I'm just going to pop my roughness. So a live light, this is true inside of Unity, it's true inside of Frostbite, CryEngine, Unreal Engine, whatever. Since that I think in third year you have the option to go UE or Unreal Engine, whatever iteration they'll be on by that point, or Unity. I don't know if anyone in the staff is familiar with CryEngine, to be honest. They are still released publicly though, right? Like full functionality. Right. So just as an aside to that, so to directly address your question and to address something that always comes up in the Twitch chat or Discord chat and with whatever, there's always the entire, you know, what engine's better, blah, 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 blah. Unity film. I forget what it's actually called. Atom. Sorry, Atom's one of them. There's a whole bunch of them. So as the engines become more and more powerful, so this is all of them. As the engines become more and more powerful, motion graphics companies, so film companies, advertising companies, pre-visualization companies, prototyping companies, are starting to find more and more use for real-time engine support. So, for example, this is one of the short films that was done in Unity 5 years ago. What has happened in the past, or the process that has happened in the past, is you'd have the 3D model, you'd have the textures, you'd have the animation, blah, 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 blah. You have the digital set, and then you would have to say, okay, for the next 12 hours, render out frames 1 to 5,000. And then you would end up with a series of, with an image sequence that you couldn't really authenticate or approve until that animation or render cycle was completed 10 hours later. Nowadays, what's happened is because because real-time rendering has become so accessible and so easy, this sort of thing, rather than right now I'm watching it in YouTube, obviously, production houses are able to just go to an artist's computer, or more likely the lead's workstation, press play inside of Unity, and see the exact same thing that we're seeing right now. Maybe at a slightly lower quality when it comes to stuff like volumetric lighting and global illumination and all that stuff. But by and large, a lot of studios are starting to shift to a real-time workflow as opposed to a pre-rendered workflow. Mm-hmm. I will not directly speak to that because I am not a Unity person. Unity and I don't typically get along because I am not, for all the technical skills that I've had to accrue over the years, code is not one of them. I can look at a flow chart or a flow visual script and kind of understand it, but I would certainly not give anyone instruction regarding it. I guess the easiest answer would be, see for yourself, because all of this is done with Unity's lighting. So you get subsurface scattering, you get global illumination, you get final gather results. I'm trying to get that shot. You get volumetric lighting. Certain programs or certain engines are going to be able to do it faster or more easily than others. But it's sort of a less who's the best at it and more who's the best at it today. And certain companies have workflows that are specifically set for a particular engine, a particular pipeline. This isn't directly in response or in regards to real-time motion graphics or motion pictures, but for example, during one of the talks, it was a talk, or presentations by Ubisoft Toronto. They're saying that a lot of their workstations are still on 3DO Max 2016 or 2017 because they're just stable and they know what errors can occur. That has the highest compatibility or highest compatibility with the plugins they use, the scripts they use, the pipeline flow that they have. So there's actually a video on the Flip Normals channel, which is a very good YouTube resource for 3D. And during one of them, he said, one of the artists says, and I'm going to paraphrase the quote, "I don't care about Unity, I don't care about Max, I don't care about Maya. It's just about, all I want to do is learn the process or learn the theory behind what I want to do, and then I just go with whatever software I'm most comfortable with." So it's a really broad, generalized statement, and that's coming from someone who has made an effort to learn Max, Maya, and now Blender. So, do with it. Take that information as you will. Anyway, back on track. So the biggest downside to doing this is that now all of those shadows will no longer be light reactive. So if I take this light and stick it right inside that engine and I crank my intensity, no matter how high my intensity goes, so right now I'm at 700%, those shadows will never go away. Those will always be the darkest areas regardless of illumination. So there are drawbacks to doing what we just did. Plus side, now your engine doesn't have to calculate ambient occlusion real time. It saves you some cycles. Downside, those shadows will not be able to react to any kind of live lighting. So if your character is carrying a torch, and the torch is ray traced ambient occlusion is going to look really good, but you better hope that you have some good optimization behind the engine. Even shadow map, it won't affect it. Even if you have image-based shadows rather than ray trace-based shadows, or ray-based shadows rather, they still won't move. So they're completely unreactive to light, which is the biggest downside to it. So let's take that process and use it for something that's a little more widely applicable. So go over to the revolver. I'm going to do the exact same process for setting up the ambient occlusion bake. Now, it is substantially higher res. This is a sub D model. So it's been modeled in a way that it can interact properly with a mesh smooth multiplier. And then the mesh smooth multiplier has been collapsed into stack. Process for getting the AO out is the same. Press 0, render to texture, confirm that underneath general settings, it's still going to your 3DCO Max output folder. Again, doesn't matter where it's going. I just hate having to dig in my system directory for textures, so I have a desktop folder. I make one, yeah. So on my folder I have a 3DCO Max bake directory and then a Substance Painter bake directory. One per program. Just so I'm not getting my 3DCO Max bakes in my Substance Painter bakes and vice versa. AO bake for the revolver. Yep. So you're already ahead of me. Between 4 and 6. It's okay. No, I like the initiative. Mapping coordinates. So go through your list. So this is a sort of pre-flight checklist before you start baking the cookies. Okay. Can they see my sorry, which stream? The Twitch stream or the Discord stream? Sorry, my waving back and forth is me actually timing how like the Twitch stream is behind IRL. 9 seconds. Yeah, I'm 9 seconds behind, even though it's telling me that I'm only... It tells me that I'm 3 seconds behind, but obviously that's not accurate. No. It's because you have projection turned on. Is Nikolai back? It just dropped. I'll try restarting the Discord screen share. Give me 1 second. Tell it to get in line. Okay, I'm gonna drop my frame rate to 15 and hopefully that will help. I'll just make sure that I pause over any kind of icons. Correct. Yeah, I'm gonna do it full start to finish, but no worries. No, I'll do it twice. Just takes a couple. No, it's all good. No worries. So if you have gone off on your own and learned Substance Painter, I'm not going to be in the position, or my current stance on that. So to directly answer, I'm just saying that this may change depending on the results that I see as a result, the results that come from it. You're free to use the software that you're comfortable with, as long as you're demonstrating, understanding of the material or getting the same end result. So going back to 15 artists, 15 different processes. That being said, if you submit textures from Substance Painter and you've made a mistake because you don't understand how to do something properly in Substance Painter, you'll still lose the marks for it. Okay. I'm on Rogers and I went down last week, so yep. Of course. Send him a message and ask Nikolai to message me on FOL just to make sure that I get back to him in a timely manner. Make sure it's on FOL though. So, side note for everyone, Discord is for, coordination. It gives you guys another channel to talk to me on. Any kind of stuff that has direct impact with your curriculum, so your attendance, if you get sick, if internet goes down, you can't attend the class. Make sure that you're letting your instructors know via FOL, not Discord. Discord is a unsupported, unofficial side to Fanshawe VGD. FOL is still your primary communication tool for communicating with your instructors, please. Okay, no worries. Okay, so I'm just gonna actually, before I keep going, since I restarted Discord screen share, is everyone able to see it fine there, or are people just watching the Twitch stream? Okay, one second. I'm gonna do some. Okay. Okay. Not excessive frame drop or anything like that? Perfect. Okay. If you would, please. Yep. When I put my AO bakes into Photoshop to keep becoming grayscale. So Photoshop will automatically detect that there's only chromatic information. Sorry, not chromatic. Grayscale information. It'll automatically open it as a grayscale. Just go into your... Oh, that doesn't help. If you're copy and pasting it into another file, then ignore it. But if you're going to be generating the texture from the AO, just go image, mode, and go RGB color. That's it. So, with the gun, it's already been unwrapped. Yeah, no worries. Good question. So, it's actually pretty easy. It's a lot of the stuff is very similar to what you guys have already done. So remember to look for similarities and use those similarities to sort of let you move forward. So this would be a hard crease. So each of the indentations between the bullet chambers, separate shell. That leaves the bullet drum as a cylinder. So cylindrical projection. There may be a lot of detail to the side or to the sort of silhouette of the main body of the pistol, but when you compare its width and its height to its depth, it basically could be treated as the tail fin on the A-wing. All right, so no worries. I'm sorry, was that Max that got stepped on? It's your CPU and RAM. So it's just taking some time to recalculate the ambient occlusion pass. It is still there. It just takes your system a little longer to redraw it. Nothing to worry about. And actually, I'm going to switch back to standard just to save on my RAM and CPU. because we already know what the AO is going to look like. So now we want to actually bake it to a consistent source. So I actually deleted my skylight. So I have no skylight in here, it's just the 3 objects. If you want to double check if you have lights in scene, so if you've already done a skylight, I usually just press H to select from scene. And I'll look for the entry of skylight. So if it is in H, there it is, Sky 001. Or if my apologies, that's the fish tank behind me. The protein skimmer is freaking out. Sorry. I would not put that past her, but no, it's the other pets. It's currently running dry because one of the coral was sick for the past couple weeks. So I had to maintain my water quality, and now that the water is starting to clean up, the protein skimmer is popping, as you can hear. No, it's my bubbler. I've had headaches where it's just a clicking sound repeatedly. Just before I get an incredible migraine. So, yes. So, make sure 1 skylight. Why is only 1 needed? Because it's an infinite sphere. You don't need 2 infinite spheres. It's just, all that's going to do is effectively set that multiplier to 200%, and then your AO is going to be completely washed out. So skylight, multiplier 1, cast shadows is turned on, select the object that you want to bake, 0, we'll bring up render to texture. So general settings, just confirm that it is still being directed to the folder on your desktop or wherever you set it. Selected object settings, enabled. Set your padding between 4 and 6. Don't turn on projection mapping because we don't have a high poly to work from. Use existing channel, always on. We never want to use Max's automatic because it's typically trash. So use existing channel. Add element to tell Max what information you're recording. So add. And we're going. Correct. No, you're right. So that actually goes. So you have to confirm and change that yourself. Correct. So there's another even though I will freely point out that Substance Painter is a lot faster when generating maps than Max. What takes Max 10 minutes, Substance will usually do in 60 seconds or 30 seconds. That being said, when we do go into Substance, because we're going to be working with different mesh types, more higher poly stuff, it still has an impact. So the entire, what I've been harping on you guys for in modeling to keep your models efficient and clean, this is part of the reason why. You okay? I'm just making sure because that sounded like a hard cough. Alright. So, lighting map, add elements, 1020, sorry, I went out of order. Change the name if you so choose. I always call them AO. Double check that file name and type is saving at the correct file name and file extension. So TGA, TIF, PNG, fine, JPEG, PSD, get out. The wish, sorry? I'm not going to change it. I think it was added in 2021 for some... No, I thought this was in 2020. Regardless. And you're inside of a light map? I mean the element that you're adjusting. Does it default to lighting map? I'm pretty sure all of them, yeah, all of them will default to, one sec, I'm just gonna clean all these now. It may be trimmed, like you may have to scroll down a bit further. But it's nothing that you need to change, especially if you're doing rendering the texture with an alpha. No worries. So, what do you mean? Oh, make sure that the revolver is selected. Yep. Did you add the lighting map? And yes, the cat is begging for food. Mika, go to sleep. 1 hour. Because I changed the name to AO. With difficulty. So AO gun underscore AO.png. It's not coming back into max, so leave the target slot blank. 1024, 1024. This will take a while. Render. Set to blank. You can leave it as ambient color, but considering that we're about to overwrite it anyway, may as well leave it blank. And then render. 1024. By the way, if you need to cancel it at any time, if you need to cancel one of the bakes while it's working, it's the escape key. So top left on your keyboard. We are going to generate the AO for it, but then we're going to do something else to it inside Photoshop. So I'm going to do the gun with you. I've already done the ship with you. You guys are going to do the lion's head on your own. Exact same process, but with what I'm about to do. bunch of people stepping on each other. We are. I just had the gun pre-rendered, or the guns AO pre-rendered, so it wouldn't absolutely murder the stream. That's pretty good, actually. Correct. So for the keeners that already have this baked out, I'll send you off to do the next piece while the rest of us wait for our computers to catch up. If you have a textures.com account, log in. If not, just go onto Google image search and just grab 2 different textures. Doesn't matter what they are. I'm sure you guys saw some of the other sections examples inside of the texture channel on Discord. On this one, no. Just prove. Why not? It's my gun, I'll tell you what. I'll do with it what I want. I'd buy it. There you go. Coral die-off has increased by 50% this year. We've now armed the coral. We do not expect any additional problems. Yep, if you would please. Just have them accessible inside of Photoshop. I'm just going to make sure that everyone's up to this point. Say hi, Mika. Indeed. Yeah, if you guys don't have a textures.com account, I highly, highly recommend it. So, is anyone still rendering, baking? Okay. Okay. You will have enough time to for your systems to bake it. The quote-unquote assignment should take you 10 minutes to do. 7 minutes of that is going to be waiting for 3CO Max to bake it. And you guys will have, I believe it's 25 minutes. So time and a half of what it should take. Or 5 if I'm playing. No, it's me. I don't have Apex. I'm just making a self-deprecating remark that having me on your team is pretty much a speed run to the you lose screen. I haven't played Overwatch in a while. Alright, I'm gonna keep going. So, I've got the AO in. I took a bare metal texture and a rust. So those are my two. Again, with this, doesn't matter what you chose. The only thing I request when you guys are using textures for your homework assignments, so any assignment that allows you to use photo textures, where you get them is up to you. So you can go Substance Share, textures.com, Google image search. The only thing that I ask you not to do is to give me something with a watermark on it, obviously. But everything else is fair. Everything else is fair game. So yeah, if it says photo bucket in 20% opacity font across your texture, thumbs down. So these are the steps we're gonna do. If you're a photo editor. So grab each of your textures. I'm just going to Control A, Control C, and Control V to paste them in with my ambient occlusion. It's my way. Yep. So you could just drag and drop them in to set them as smart objects or smart layers. I just opened all three files at the same time and then just Control A, copy. So Control A will select the entire canvas, then Control V to paste. Go to the second texture, Control A to select everything, Control C, and Control V to paste. Via a quick save action or gotcha. Some textures rather don't have, some textures don't have a PNG format available. They're just JPEGs. At this point, we're not being that critical of the resolution and compression. So as long as the texture that you use it in is saved out as a PNG, you're fine. Not quite. So I have the same situation here with my metal texture. So, so I'll just do this. If it doesn't fill the screen, I'd say control click the thumbnail. So I just control click the thumbnail for my metal. I switch over to the move tool with V or Victor. And then mousing over the texture or piece of texture that I can see, holding down Alt to switch to the clone move tool. And I just pull up a copy or a clone more accurately. And there you go. And the best thing about using clone as opposed to copy and paste is that you don't end up with multiple layers that you then need to merge down. It just does the clone inside the current layer. So if I had something like this, so say for some reason I needed to so say this was a manhole cover and I wanted it to appear in multiple places on the texture, I can control click the thumbnail, switch to the move tool with V, Victor, and then just start populating out with it without creating a new layer each time I do a duplicate. You picked a very small texture. Just don't do that with the assignment. But you're fine. So, follow these steps exactly. So I've got my rust, my metal, and my AO. So I'll just call this, just so that people don't get paranoid that they don't have rust or they don't have metal. It's my texture 1, my texture 2. I'm going to my AO. So this is the file that was baked out of Max. Control A to select canvas. Control C to copy the AO to my clipboard. And then I'm going into texture 1. So I've clicked on the texture 1 thumbnail. Click new layer mask. So it's the rectangle with the circle cut out of it. Here's the thing that you guys have probably never done inside digital drawing. I'm going to hold down Alt and click on the thumbnail for the layer. Sorry, for the mask. So that white square that comes up, I'm holding down Alt and clicking on it. You'll notice that the eyes for the 3 layers gets grayed out because at the top of my Photoshop window, I'm currently actually in the layer mask. So it's not going to take any RGB information that I put in. It's just going to take black and white. And that's all that we have on our clipboard. So with that layer mask active, so again, you can double check on the tab for the document. So layer mask, Control, Shift, V to paste in place. Yep. So go to your AO layer. You don't have to make other layers invisible. I'm just showing you that I am on my AO. Control A, Control C. Going to texture 1. Add a mask. So add layer mask. Hold down Alt and left click on the mask's thumbnail. Control Shift V to paste in place. After the mask is created, it's hold down Alt and left mouse button click it. It's this icon down here. Yeah, that's quite apt actually. Hold down Alt and click on the mask's thumbnail. So that white square that gets created to the right of the thumbnail for texture 1. then Control Shift V. Okay, that thing's driving me nuts. So while you guys do that, I'll quickly top it off. It can go for an hour without my skimmer being on. So you should see the AO now on screen. Click on one of the RGB thumbnails, doesn't matter which one, to go back to RGB mode. Click on a layers thumbnail. Exactly. You copy the AO onto your clipboard. Yep, Control A, Control C. Then Alt left click the mask thumbnail and just paste. Yep. Yep. Yep, Thea's got it. First texture. It needs to be at the top. It needs to be at the top, otherwise it's just going to be blocked out. Nope, I haven't changed its setting yet. Share your screen, Leo. Oh, sorry, Alyssa. I'm not watching whose name lights up. I'm just trying to remember your voices. Yep. Texture 1's not visible. It's Friday. Yep. Exactly. Any of them. Yep. Because that will get you out of the mask edit mode. Yep. So getting the mask on is delete. Control A, Control C. Go to your, yep. Going to the texture at the top of your list. Add mask. So as, sorry, I didn't recognize the voice of who said it, but the icon that looks like a Japanese flag. That'll create a mask, which is blank white. Alt click on it, and Control Shift V to paste in place. And you'll actually see the texture update in the upper right hand, well, if you have the navigator open. Are you actually inside the mask? Does it say layer mask on the document? Share screen. It's not actually connecting to your display. Can you see screen, Carrington? Me neither. Yep. That would actually probably be faster. Do a screenshot and then paste it into TX Help or TX Resources, one of the TX channels. Okay. It's the icon at the bottom of the layers list that looks like the Japanese flag. I don't know why it's showing your layers as being visible when you're in a layer mask. Because it does, you're correct, it does say that it's layer mask, but it's not actually in layer mask display. Unless you're holding down Alt and clicking on the this white thumbnail. Yeah. You have to hold down Alt and click it. Otherwise, it just selects it. And then Control Shift V to paste in place. Sweet. So I've already dragged and dropped my texture into max. Oops. Material. Grabby. Which, if we're going after if the entire idea is to show that areas where surfaces are close together, so typically what you'll see with metal is that when metal is adjacent to one another, especially if metal is rubbing against one another, that's usually where your rust will start. So those abrasions wears off any kind of weatherproofing that's on it, creates small striations that allows the water to start oxidizing the metal more quickly, more easily. What I have right now is the exact opposite of what I want. I don't have the rust material or the rust texture showing in areas where my ambient occlusion is. I've got it reversed. So inside of Photoshop, I can just go to that mask, invert, double click on what? Do you have it brought in as a smart object? Sure. So all I've done is I've gone into that mask and hit Control I to invert the black and white. This is in the map. Sorry, this is being saved out as a diffuse because it's still color information. So I haven't done anything with the AO aside from using it as a source for that mask. So now when I bring it to max, that makes more sense. The layer mask to have the image. Copy and paste the AO. You have to be holding down Alt when you click on the layer mask. So layer mask add, Control A, copy, Alt click on the thumbnail. Come here. Alt click, paste. What's that? It depends on the effect you're going for. So in my case, I do have rust and metal, so it makes sense to have the rust appear where the surfaces are close together, where moisture would be allowed to accumulate, hence causing faster oxidization or rusting. So inverting the mask gets that done. Control I. Yep. Boop, boop. Mm-hmm. For now, this is just practice, so you can save it as whatever you want. Just don't submit JPEGs to me, please. So in my case, this is my end result. Again, makes it look a little more grounded because now I've got some context to where this rust is occurring. Because it's all being done on a mask, I can actually add a new layer mask to it, or another stacked layer mask. Or inside the mask itself. And so certain things, like if I'm looking at the bolts, or the screws rather, so slight no-no, that's true on this model and that you guys should avoid. Notice that all the screws are oriented the exact same way. They're flat to the x-axis. Don't do this. Yep. So don't do this when you guys are modeling. Give some little rotational offset to the screws. So you guys don't have to do this, but I'm going to adjust it. I don't follow you. Right. Yep, screws. Okay. So now I can go in with another layer. I've got the AO. And anywhere I have screws. So my other screws, and there it is. So I'm not painting with colors. Notice on the left I'm in just black and white. Save this out. PNG. So I can start painting in rust drips. Yep. Diffuse, just diffuse. It's just dragging and dropping the texture on. Oh, it's because you didn't have a skylight in when you did your ambient occlusion bake, so it's going to look different. Did you catch that, Leo? Yeah, that's a that's Max's, wait. Yeah, it's Max's default light. That's not an AO. It's because the shadows from the Max default light are different than an ambient occlusion shadow. That would be re-resing. So if you scaled it up, it's going to lose resolution and look pixelated. Sorry, repeat that, Garrett. But it looks jagged, like low res. Okay. Yep, see it. As long as it's just a test, that's usually a really good idea. Because, like I've said in other classes, you really don't know what's the best situation until you've gotten some more experience. So you can do a quick test of, this is how I know how I want to texture it, but I don't know what the best unwrap method is. Quickly do one version of the unwrap, bring it into Photoshop, apply some textures, see if it looks correct, and then keep that texture result. Garrett, I think the two textures that you've chosen are too close together. That's why you're not seeing much of a difference. Like they're too similar to one another. Because I could actually see the AO halo around the safety switch and along the barrel, but not anywhere else. Get off. Yes. Nika, come here. Yup. Yep. So basically what you guys are going to have to do in the next 25 minutes is do this exact same process. So using the AO to blend between two separate textures for the lion's head. Texture choice is up to you. You know, as long as I can tell that there are two different textures in play, don't have one texture that's light gray and the other texture as slightly lighter gray. Two different colors or two different textures. Oh, crap. Sorry, repeat that. I clicked out the channel for some reason. Sorry, this is Thea. Okay. Yeah, that works for the revolver. They are a little close though. I just have a little bit of contrast, either in sure, but do it with the lion's head. So here's the step-by-step of what I want you guys to be doing. So generate the AO on the Lion, save out the AO as a PNG, source 2 textures, try and get them to 1024, or try and make your texture source around 1024 so you don't have to duplicate them. Use your AO to create shadow information in your texture, so what we just did, or what I just did with the F-Zero Racer, the Wild Goose. And then use the AO to mask the appearance of the second image. So what I just did on the Revolver. The watermark, I can do this. So the only thing that's quote unquote odd about this is that I don't want you saving the, so you're going to submit to me the diffuse texture that has the 2-color blend plus ambient occlusion shadow information in it. So you're submitting that to me. You are also submitting the ambient occlusion black and white itself, but you're going to actually name it specular. So your 2 texture blend plus AO shadows is your Twitch or Discord name _ diffuse. The original AO, the black and white that Max spit out, that's going to be your Twitch or Discord name _ specular. And that's what I'm going to end the lesson with, or I'm going to end the lesson with looking at that. So this texture, the gun texture, or sorry, the method that we used on the gun to create the blend between the 2 textures, plus the ambient occlusion shadows from the F-Zero car. So hint, there's another layer that needs to be in here. I just did it. Oh, sorry. Forgot that I changed my so the gun with the the method we use for the gun to blend between textures plus the AO shadow. I have the same model. She is. This is the diffuse. This is your color info. Oops, come on. And this is the AO that Max created, but I want you to name it as specular because that's going to feed into what we're about to do next. Yes, please. You got it, Daddy-o. I'm just going to type a little bit of an addendum to that. It's the AO shadows and then AO texture blend. Sorry, what do you mean? The black and white AO, name it specular, and then the RGB blend with the AO shadows as diffuse. Just the images. Yeah, just the 2 images. Because I'm going to mark them from inside of FOL. I'm not going to download these. Please PNGs. I'm fine with TIFF, I'm fine with TGA. I love PNG. I detest JPG, and PSD makes my brain hurt. It's because you do, Jacqueline, it's because you're you don't have the alpha channel saved. Or sorry, you're not rendering it with an alpha channel. I assume that you're talking about your AO. It won't affect it. You can still use it even if the alpha isn't coming through. Nope, just resize them. Resize them or copy it or duplicate them like I did with mine. Yep. 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 Don't forget that I'm streaming. Don't forget that I'm streaming on Twitch, and this is the same content that I did yesterday, but with a different target object. So you guys have a slight bit of a actually, you guys don't. You have the smallest advantage over section 2 because I logged this process 15 minutes before their class started. You guys actually have another video from 24 hours ago that shows this exact same process. Like I said, this is meant to be easy marks, which is why I never lock browsers or lock Internet Explorer or whatever during any of my midterms. Nope, just images, please. The 2 textures for the lion's head. It would be the easiest. Well, am I going to hide them next week? No, I'll keep them there next week too. Yeah, you can go back and watch it. No. Completely different object. Yep. So if you're just cloning a texture to get it to sort of fill the space, control click the thumbnail, switch to the move tool. 1 second, I'm just going to put the thing up. Switch to the move tool, hold down Alt, and click and drag to easily clone inside of the same layer. Ideally, it's your either Discord or Twitch name. Like, it'll automatically be under your student student name, but it's doubling as attendance. Yep. So in my case, the AO would be called VGD model texture underscore specular.png, and the diffuse would be VGD model texture underscore diffuse.png for the color. By the way, this is pretty much what you guys are going to be seeing during the midterms. So I'll have a black screen holder or splash screen up while you guys are writing the midterms. I'll still be in voice chat inside of Discord, but obviously not sharing my screen. I'll still be on the Twitch or in the Twitch channel, but this will be something like this will be covering my screen because I'll most likely be grading at that point. So your exams are live, but you won't be able to see what I'm working on, or what I'm grading rather. After you click back onto the RGB thumbnail, yes. Mm-hmm. So I will directly answer that, but I'm gonna quickly check something. Oh, where did I see that link? One of the third years had a really good stylized texture guide, or they linked to a really good stylized texture guide. One second, I really want to find it because, again, fan. So give me 2 ticks. Stylized versus realistic. It's an aesthetic choice. It's a personal choice. So I'll accept either. My personal preference, my personal gravitation is towards stylized, just because it shows a better sense of control or command of what goes into the texture. Nothing that I ask you guys to do in texture 1 or texture 2 needs to be indistinguishable from real life, or hyper realistic. because you guys won't be doing that sort of thing until the end of year 2 when you guys get into Marmoset. The 2 PNGs. That's it. There. Just change its name to Specular. Bingo. Yep. Well, that's not it for today, but I'm going to take it one step further that you guys don't need to do for the midterm, but you will have to do for the first assignment afterwards. I'm still trying to find that that guide. Yeah. As long as the exactly. Seven and a half. It's the industry, more or less. So I found the hand-painted 3D models thing. I'm going to copy and paste it inside of the Twitch channel. From Photoshop or from Max? What's that, sorry? No, if it's in the general settings, it should automatically bake there, unless you change its directory when you set the file name. Rather than rendering it again, you can just go into Max and just Oh, okay. Just under 5 minutes. Correct. Just the images, please. On FOL. It's AOL in-class Dropbox section 1. Correct. Just the images, please. Correct. I've actually got a countdown. Yes. The file name itself is your name underscore diffuse, your name underscore specular. Correct. Just the images, please. So, there you go. Preview of coming attractions next week in both modeling and texturing. Correct. Three hours. So the last thing I'll show you guys, I'm actually going to use the gun for this because it makes a little bit more sense. So this falls directly in line with what I did last class. So the reason why you guys saved those the AOs out as a specular, or named specular rather. So I'll just relink my diffuse to the blend we did. And actually I'll save this out with the shadows in it. Oh, I'm showing you what we're going to be covering in week 7. Correct. So there's what we just did. I've got the ambient occlusion shadow plus the ambient occlusion blend, so it's still going between the two textures. I've started to add on a little bit to the mask. So if we go based off of that same idea of based on where the object is, what elements the object's exposed to, in this case I'm going for rust on metal. I don't know if you guys have much experience, first-hand experience looking at a rusted object, but there's unless it's wet, there's very little, if any, specular highlight on it. There's no like little white bean or circle on it. It's a very flat, very diffused specular highlight. Whereas with metal, especially if it's, and we're going to make a slight assumption here, if it's freshly forged or just been polished, burnished, whatever the hell, it's going to be pretty shiny. And I'm going to the wrong folder repeatedly. Max Mix, there it is. Nope, it's actually my downloads. So using that same idea, I'll get rid of my skylight. Right now that AO image is driving my specularity, so any areas in white, Max reads that as make these shiny. Any areas in black, make these very dull. These are the exact same places those two textures occur. So white is steel, black is rust. So when I go in, show in viewport, anywhere there's rust, there's going to be a very dull, if any, highlight. Let's switch over to high quality mode. So you can see it right here. Now I do have a, no, it's 100 multiply. So I could probably tweak the mask a little bit more, or tweak the AO a bit more. But again, anytime you want to see the real effect or the real translation, what specularity is doing, and this goes for people who are familiar with Substance Painter as well. So in Max, again, you won't necessarily have to go this far, but you guys probably already know pressing C on the keyboard to toggle between your channels inside of Substance Painter. So again, what you're seeing here, there's that dark line going straight down the drum. That's not color information. That's this object not returning any light from my OmniLight. If I drive this all the way up, that will never illuminate or never return information, because it's being told, or Max is being told, that area is incredibly rough and has a very low specularity. Don't give it a highlight. Versus the size of the gun, where Max is being told these are very smooth, return a lot of highlight information. And that's what you guys will have to demonstrate inside of a texture with the next assignment after the midterm. Just one small little add to that. If you guys go to that pistol, go into edit poly mode, grab the bullet barrel, or the bullet drum rather, and pull it out. Because I have both ambient shadow plus that ambient color blend, so going from rust to steel, I've got this black band or dark band going across the top of the drum down the side. Is that a problem? It could be a huge problem. If this gun needs to rotate, if this drum needs to rotate as a bullet fires, so if this is animated, now you've got this dark line that's going to make its way around as it's being fired. If the drum needs to be able to pop out to be reloaded, you're going to see that dark line. So paying attention to what's around the object. Remember, ambient occlusion is the shadows cast on and between two objects when they're close together. If I was doing something like the ambient occlusion for the F-Zero fighter, the Wild Goose, and I had its unwrap stacked. So this is something that you guys have already found with the F-Zero Blue Falcon. So I just ran symmetry. So now I've got, half the shells. I can repack everything to be a little tighter as long as it doesn't screw up any kind of text. But because those shells are now stacked, if I were to lose, or if I didn't have this little side piece, if the car was asymmetrical, but I have symmetrical overlapped unwraps, that's what it's going to give me. It's taking the AO information that is correctly being generated by these two surfaces being close to one another and applying it someplace it doesn't make sense. So you will see a little bit of this, not to this extreme on the midterm, but going forward, now that you guys are hopefully getting a little bit more comfortable with unwrapping, this is another situation where, depending on what kind of texture you want to be applying to it, certain overlaps are going to make sense and work fine. Certain unwraps aren't. If you go back and watch yesterday's preamble, so the half hour that I just do stuff before the class starts, when I was unwrapping my podium pennant, whatever the hell this is, whatever it's going to be, there was a specific point where I had these two stacked, but they weren't stacked correctly. I had these polygons on the on the UV sheet overlapped with these polygons. They're the same shape, they're the same size, so yeah, they can be stacked. But if you're baking an ambient occlusion map, these 4 polygons are going to take a shadow because this wooden post runs into them. These 4 polygons won't. There's nothing to cast an occlusion shadow. So how you unwrap, how the objects are positioned to one another, all of that matters. So the level of complexity is going to slowly but steadily increase all the way to the end, when I'm going to have you guys being able to take a plane. And I didn't prepare for this demonstration, so if this works out well, I'm going to be impressed. You'll then have a list of maps, diffuse, specular, normals. And we're going to set it up. Give me 1 second. Bloop. To essentially look like this. So single polygon, but when you bring in the light, it actually looks like it's 3D. It's a normal map, and it's an AO blend. It's a little bit of both. So this is where we're headed by the end of the term. So there's already some elements in here that you guys are familiar with. Unwrapping, making sure your textures line up correctly, adding in components that are not represented by 3D mesh. So again, it's a single polygon. It's 2 triangles, but it has enough information to make it look like it has thousands. And it's all being done via the texture. And then I can, if I want to get fancy with it, turn on preserve UVs. Give it a couple more polygons. And now I've got a wall section from the same unwrap, from the same image. And again, 0 geometry, or 10 tries. So that's where we're headed. But that's in the coming weeks. For now, you guys have 6 objects for the Pantheon assignment or the Temple assignment, or at least 6 objects. So use those to practice your unwrap and practice baking AOs, doing blends, that sort of thing. Again, these skills aren't something that are developed by understanding it or by retaining the process. It's best developed by repetition. So you guys have a bunch of stuff to experiment with. Do so. That would be my recommendation for next week. Texturing is going to be unwrap, generate an AO, blend textures with an AO, and add a little bit of structure to it. Not with a normal map though. Normal map is week 9. Unwrap, generate AO, use AO shadow, use AO blend, and then adding non-mesh structures to it. So, correct. You'll be able to source your own photos. So you are allowed to photo manipulate for the midterm. You just can't photo drop. So you can use painted steel, or, you know, I've got bare steel going here as a starting point, but you have to adjust it somehow, either adding scorch marks, seams, that sort of thing. Correct. So basically the assignment is practice for the midterm. So I'll let the stream run out for the remaining 60-80 seconds. Then I will go have a cigarette break, and then I will be in Discord after I feed the cat before she eats me. Right, Mika? Mika? Yeah? You hungry? Yeah, I bet. You guys are really missing out on not watching the stream camera because she's trying to climb on me. I'm not. She usually is, but I do have a beanbag chair behind me. Yeah, it doesn't see much use these days. Just to repeat. It's okay. Yep. 2 gobies. No, she doesn't. The only fish she cares about is in one of the freshwater tanks, and it's the shyest fish that I have. But anytime it's out and about, Mika just stares at him. It's the weirdest thing. Hey, Mika? Am I talking about you and Gary? Yeah? Yeah. Gary. Gary the female Plecostomus. Not many of them have names. One of them's named Sashimi. That'll tell you enough about my sense of humor. No problem. If you guys have any questions, just fire me a Discord message. If you want one-on-one breakout sessions, leave me a Discord message now. Like I said, I'm going to take care of the cat who's absolutely starving, aren't you? Hey? Starving. Yeah, meow. Go for it. Mm-hmm. Not at all. No, it's 24 hours in advance, ideally. You know what? You don't lose anything by using them. If you don't use it, you don't use it. Or if you don't need it, you don't need it. But if you have the option, just do it. No, you email me and that's it. It's better to... So I'll still be in the Discord channel while people are... Well, like I said, I'm going to be grading. Unless stars align and I finish grading the day that I start. Not happening. Then I'm going to be in Discord. And I'll just obviously not be screen sharing. And since you get time and... since most accommodations allow for time and a half, I'll just be in Discord and you guys can still message me. There are still going to be questions that I can't answer just because that's the knowledge that you're being tested on. But at the same time, because you guys are online, you've got all the Twitch VODs, you've got Google, and actually that's none of the tests are made with that in mind. So nothing is in there that you've never seen, that you've never been tested on before, or that you've never had to do. But realize that once you guys get into third year rather, and everyone starts sort of scattering out, so like the 3D art, the modeling artists go one direction, the sculptors going in another direction, concept artists going in another direction. You get to specialize, yeah. You are still required to show base proficiencies in all disciplines, but third year you specialize. Do you really want to do that? No problem. Like I said, I'll be on Discord, so if you have questions or whatnot, just leave me a message. Yep.